a symbol of hope for global unity. United Nations Day, on October 24th, marks the anniversary of the entry into force in 1945 of the UN Charter. With the ratification of this founding document by the majority of its signatories, including the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, the United Nations officially came into being. There is no other global organization with the legitimacy, convening power, and normative impact of the United Nations. No other global organization gives hope to so many people for a better world and can deliver the future we want. Today, the urgency for all countries to come together to fulfill the promise of the nations united has rarely been greater. UN Day, celebrated every year, offers the opportunity to amplify our common agenda and reaffirm the purposes and principles of the UN Charter that have guided us for the past 79 years.
In 1945, representatives of 50 countries met in San Francisco at the United Nations Conference on International Organization to draw up the United Nations Charter. The United Nations officially came into existence on October 24, 1945, when the Charter had been ratified by a majority of signatories. Watch history in the making with this footage from the UN archives.
As World War II was about to end in 1945, nations were in ruins, and the world wanted peace. Representatives of 50 countries gathered at the United Nations Conference on International Organization in San Francisco, California from April 25th to June 26th, 1945. For the next 2 months, they proceeded to draft and then sign the UN Charter, which created a new international organization, the United Nations, which it was hoped would prevent another world war like the one they had just lived through. For months after the San Francisco Conference ended, the United Nations officially began on October 24th, 1945, when it came into existence after its charter had been ratified by China, France, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, the United States, and by a majority of other signatories. Now, more than 75 years later, the United Nations is still working to maintain international peace and security, give humanitarian assistance to those in need, protect human rights, and uphold international law. At the same time, the United Nations is doing new work not envisioned for it in 1945 by its founders. The United Nations has set Sustainable Development Goals for 2030 in order to achieve a better and more sustainable future for us all. UN member states have also agreed to climate action to limit global warming. With many achievements now in its past, the United Nations is looking to the future to new achievements. The history of the United Nations is still being written.
The history of the United Nations is still being written. The main bodies of the United Nations are the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, the Trusteeship Council, the International Court of Justice, and the UN Secretariat. All were established under the UN Charter when the organization was founded in 1945. The General Assembly is the main deliberative, policy-making, and representative organ of the UN. All 193 member states of the UN are represented in the General Assembly, making it the only UN body with universal representation. Each year in September, the full UN membership meets in the General Assembly Hall in New York for the annual General Assembly session and general debate, which many heads of state attend and address. Decisions on important questions, such as those on peace and security, admission of new members, and budgetary matters, require a 2/3 majority of the General Assembly. Decisions on other questions are by simple majority. The General Assembly each year elects a GA president to serve a 1-year term of office.